Hello everyone, let's start our today's topic, that is the Caliphate. Today in this video, we will be discussing in detail about Caliphate. So let's start our video. So in a previous video, we talked about Muslims and the rise of Islam in Arabia, and today we'll be discussing in detail about the Caliphate. Now after Muhammad's death in 632, there was no one who could actually be considered legitimately to claim to be the next prophet of Islam. So, as a result of which, what happened was that the political authority was transferred to the Ummah, that was the organization, and there was no established principle of the succession. So, there was no prophet after Muhammad. So now all the power was in the hand of the Ummah, and this actually created opportunities for innovations, for certain changes, but also it also caused deep divisions among the Muslims. So there was this one force that was actually unifying the community of the Muslims, and that force was not present now. Now the biggest innovation was the creation of the institution of the Caliphate, in which what happened was that the leader of the community was called as Amir al-Muminin, and he actually became the deputy or the Khalifa of the Prophet. Now, very importantly, we'll be discussing about the first four caliphs, that is from 632 to 61, and we'll also be talking about how they justified their powers on the basis of their close association with the Prophet, and also continued his work under the general guidelines as he had provided. Now there were the twin objectives of the Caliphate, that was firstly to retain the control over the tribes that was constituting the Ummah. The second objective was to raise the resources for the state. So these were the twin objectives of the Caliphate, that was to retain the control over the tribes and also to raise the resources for the state. Now after Muhammad's death, there were many of the tribes that actually have broken away, and there was no unity amongst them, and they were actually away from the Islamic state. Now some tribes were there that have even raised their own prophets to establish their communities, and they were modeled on the Ummah. Now the first caliphate, if we discuss about, was Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr actually suppressed the revolts by a series of campaigns which he has started, and the second caliph was Umair, who shaped the Ummah's policy of expansion of power. Now the caliph knew actually that the Ummah could not be maintained out of the modest income that was being derived from the trade and the taxes. It actually required additional revenue to be run in a smooth manner. Now realizing its need to run properly, the rich booty, that is ghanima, that could be obtained from the expeditionary raids, the caliph and his military commanders had so much of tribal strength that they wanted to conquer the lands that were belonging to the Byzantine Empire in the west and the Sasanian Empire in the east. Now, at the height of their empire, that is the Byzantine and the Sasanian empires, they were ruling actually over vast territories, and they had command over huge resources, which actually helped them to pursue their political and commercial interest in Arabia. Now, if we talk about the Byzantine Empire, it actually promoted Christianity, and the Sasanian Empire patronized Zoroastrianism. Now, the Zoroastrianism was the ancient religion of Iran. Now, on the eve of the Arab invasions, these two empires, that is the Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian empires, they actually declined in strength. What happened? Why they declined? They declined due to the religious conflicts and revolts by the aristocracy. Due to this, it made the work of the Arabs easier to annex the territories through wars and the treaties. Now, in three successful campaigns that were being carried out from 637 to 642, the Arabs brought Syria, Iraq, Iran and Egypt under the control of Medina. Now, these military strategy, religious fervor, and weakness of the opposition had all contributed to the success of the Arabs. So, further, the campaigns were launched by the third caliph. Now, we'll be discussing about the third caliph. The third caliph was Uthman, and he was responsible to extend the control to Central Asia. Now, within a decade of the death of Muhammad, the Arab Islamic State have controlled the vast territory between the Nile and the Oxus River. Now, these lands remain under the Muslim rule to this day. Even today, they are under the Muslim rule. If you see map number 1 that is given on this slide, this map clearly shows the Islamic lands, the area that are under the Muslim rule. For example, Palestine, Iraq, Iran, Syria, and so on. Now, if we talk about all the provinces that were being conquered, the caliphs actually have imposed a new administrative structure over these provinces that was actually headed by the governors. The governors were also called as amirs, and also by the tribal chieftains that were called as ashraf. Now, the term that was used for governors was amirs, and the term used for tribal chieftains was ashraf. Now, the central treasury, that is also called as Bath al-Mal, that central treasury was obtained or that was being collected from the revenue that was paid by Muslims, as well as its share of the booty from the raids. So the central treasury was kind of filled up by the taxes that were being paid by the Muslims and also from the raids. Now the caliph soldiers, that is the soldiers of the caliphs, mostly they were the Bedouins who have actually settled in camp cities at the edge of the desert, such as Kufa and Basra, and they remained within the reach of their natural habitat as well as the caliph's command. So they lived in the area of the edge of the desert. Why? So that they're easily near their natural habitat also, where they wanted to live, and they're also within the reach of the caliph, so that if caliph require them, or they can be there at caliph's demand. Now the ruling class, if we talk about, and the soldiers, they received shares of the booty, and they also received monthly payments, and the non-Muslim population, they retained their rights to property and religious practices on the payment of taxes. So all the non-Muslim population have to pay taxes if they have to have their right over property, or they wanted to practice and propagate their religion. So some of the taxes that actually the non-Muslims had to pay were kharaj and jizya. Now Jews and the Christians, if we talk about, were declared as protected subjects of the state, and the term that was used for them was the dhimmis, and they have given a large measure of autonomy in the conduct of their communal affairs. Now the political expansion, very importantly, and the unification did not come easily to the Arab tribesmen. It was very difficult to unify, and political expansion was equally difficult. So what happened was, how it was successful for them. So the territorial expansion, if we talk about, and the unity of the Ummah, they were a very important topics, and it became a threat because there were certain conflicts over the distribution of resources and the officer positions or in the offices. So everywhere there were certain kinds of conflicts that were coming up. So hence unification was very difficult. Now the ruling class of the early Islamic State, that actually comprised almost entirely of the Quraysh of Mecca. Quraysh, if you remember, was the tribe to which Muhammad belonged to. Now the third caliph, if we talk about, that was Uthman. I told you about him. That is, his time period was 644 to 56. He was also a Quraysh, and he packed his administration with his own men so that he can get secure, and he can get a better control. Now, this further intensified the Meccan character of the state, and there was the conflict with the other tribesmen as well. So, the opposition in Iraq and Egypt had actually combined with the opposition in Medina, and it all led to the assassination of Uthman. So, with Uthman's death, Ali became the fourth caliph. So, after the third caliph's death, that is Uthman, Ali became the fourth caliph. And how Uthman died? So, there was this opposition in Iraq and Egypt. So these combined forces of the opposition, that is opposition of Iraq and Egypt, they combined with opposition in Medina, and which led to the assassination of Uthman. Now, the conflict amongst the Muslims deepened after Ali became the caliph. That was in 656 to 61. So they fought, actually two wars were being fought against those who represented the Meccan aristocracy, and Ali has established himself at Kufa and defeated an army that was led by Muhammad's wife, that was Aisha. That the battle name was the Battle of the Camel, that was held in 657, and he was, however, not able to suppress the faction that was being led by Muawiyah. Who was Muawiyah now? Muawiyah was a kinsman of Uthman and the governor of Syria. Now, Ali's second battle was at Siffin. Siffin is in northern Mesopotamia, and it ended in a truce which split his followers into two groups. Now, some remained loyal to him, while the others were there who left the camp and came to be known as Kharjis. So soon after, when Ali was assassinated by a Kharji in a mosque at Kufa, after his death, his followers paid allegiance to his son, that is Hussein, and his descendants. So Muawiyah, who was a kinsman of Uthman and the governor of Syria, as I told you, he made himself the next caliph in 661. And he founded the Umayyad dynasty, which we'll be talking about in the coming up videos. And this Umayyad dynasty lasted till 750. So after the civil wars, it appeared as if Arab domination would disintegrate. So there were also several signs that the tribal conquerors were adopting some of the sophisticated culture of their subject, and it was also under the Umayyads that a prosperous clan of the Quraysh tribe, to which Muhammad belonged, that a second round of consolidation was taking place. So children, that's all for today. We'll come back with the next video with the next topic. Till then, thank you so much.